Good morning, and welcome to our hybrid worship service. My name is Ryan Yuri, and I will be your celebrant today. So I'd like to extend a special welcome to everybody who's here worshiping with us for the first time. We're so glad you could be here today. If you've come in person, you should have received a welcoming packet when you arrived. There's a card in it. If you could fill that out and drop it in the offering basket when it comes around, we'll get in touch and support you in helping to find your way into our community. If you happen to be on Zoom, you can fill out a card on our website that has the exact same information, and we'll get in touch. In the meantime, please join us in the fellowship hall downstairs after service for coffee. If you happen to be on Zoom, we do virtual discussion rooms, so a virtual coffee hour, and we'd be happy if you stuck around, didn't log off immediately, joined us for those. Now, let's say our words of welcome together. Welcome to you, old friends and new, young and old. You are an essential part of our celebration today. Whether today is your first or your 1000th Sunday in our midst, hunger because you are with us. We are one people of many beliefs, identities, origins, sexualities, and genders. We are all growing, all learning, all loved, body, mind, heart, and spirit. Just as you are welcome here. Now we're going to take a moment to say hello across the technical divide. We're going to start by showing the people who are joining us via Zoom. If you are at home, please turn on your camera. Everybody at home, give a wave. Now, for everyone who's here in person, it's your turn. The camera's right over there. Thank you all. We do have one announcement this morning. The membership committee is hosting a new to UU workshop and light lunch today. It's in the fellowship hall downstairs after the service. There will be time to get acquainted, ask questions, and get introduced to Unitarian Universalism, including a little history and understanding of our shared values and principles. If you're a newcomer to our congregation and would like to know more about Unitarian Universalism or the UUCP, please feel free to join. Now we begin with our service with a territorial acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land in which our homes and our church were built was not uninhabited when European settlers arrived here with their ideas of conquest and ownership. For those of us who live in Moscow, Pullman, or other nearby communities, we live on the ancestral homelands of the Nimipu, called the Nez Perce by French-speaking traders, the Palouse, and the Chich-Umsh, called the Coeur d'Alene. If you're joining us from somewhere else, I encourage you to discover who inhabited or moved through the place where you now live in the times before colonization and genocide, and where those people are now. We pause to remember that we live on ground that is sacred, ground that was stolen, ground that cries out for justice and responsible stewardship. May our remembering help us to find the courage to do our part to restore wholeness to the earth and all her peoples. We also pause for a moment to light a candle and pray for peace. We hold in our hearts all those currently threatened by greed and imperialism, from the people in Ukraine to those in Somalia. May we recommit ourselves to nurturing peace, peace in the world, as well as peace within. We're also hoping that the folks joining us via Zoom have a chalice or a candle to light and something to light it with. Let us now light our chalices together. Please speak the words up on the screen together with me. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek and seek to share.
Yeah. Thank you. Please be seated. Good morning. I am the Reverend Dr. Elizabeth Stevens, and I have the extraordinary privilege of serving this community as its minister. Will you repeat after me? It is good. It is good to be. It is good to be here. It is good to be here together. Today we're going to be talking about courage. The word courage comes from the word cœur, which means heart. So I define courage as choosing love in the face of fear. In every moment of our lives, we have the opportunity to ask ourselves, what is the most loving thing I can do right now? Now, it's hard to be courageous all the time. Sometimes it comes naturally and easily, and sometimes it just doesn't. I want to be clear about a couple of things. Courage doesn't involve self-sacrifice. We have to be loving toward ourselves, too. If we're harming ourselves in pursuit of loving other people, odds are we're being codependent rather than courageous. No is a very courageous word to say. And according to Brené Brown, "You hurt my feelings" is one of the bravest sentences in the English language. Our service today is going to be structured a little differently than usual. Instead of having a meditation and then a reading and a homily, we're going to have 6 movements, each looking at a different kind of courage with 6 little mini meditations separating them. I'll be inviting you to reflect on times when you exhibited that particular kind of courage or times when you needed it and it wasn't there. I'll be asking where you find this type of courage, what are the inspirations for it, and what might you do if you had more? Once we've reflected internally on all 6 types of courage, we're going to take a little bit of time and you'll be invited to share with your neighbor, or if you're online, share in the chat any insights that came up for you during this service. Does that all make sense? Awesome. And if it doesn't, if some of you are confused, hopefully it'll get cleared up when we actually get there. For now, let's rise in body or in spirit and sing together again. Hymn number 1000, Morning Has Come.
Light of
Yeah, unless we have to.
Give that a shot.
Yeah.
Okay. Now is the time in our service. It's the time for all ages. If the kids would like to come forward, please meet me up here. I've never done this. Okay. All right. Can you hear me? Oh. Well, all the kids are up on the balcony, of course. Now let's take a moment to engage in the practice of generosity together. For those of you able to make a financial contribution, the logistics are up on the screen. We'd invite you to either copy down the information you need or just go to the website to make a donation. The web address is in the chat. Those of you who are newer or visiting from another part of the country might not know that we typically give away all of the cash we receive during offering to local charities whose values align with those of the church. This is a program we call the Month of Sundays. This month, the recipient is Family Promise of the Palouse. Their mission is to empower families with children experiencing homelessness to achieve sustainable independence for a more promising future. We haven't resumed Family Promise here at the church yet, but we are working on it. We, back before construction, hosted families here pretty frequently and hope to do so again very soon. If you're donating online, you can choose Month of Sundays from the drop-down menu. If you're mailing or dropping off a check, just write in the memo line whether it's for Month of Sundays or for the general fund. Now, in the spirit of love and for the continuing work of this church, we'll take some time to practice generosity together.
Now is the music that's going to be framing our time together for the next 6 movements, reflections on the kinds of courage, is I Know This Rose Will Open. So I'd invite you to sing along, either from your seat, or you're welcome to stand if that's more comfortable for you.
I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open.
We're going to begin this morning by reflecting on physical courage. It takes physical courage to try new things or to participate in activities that are fun but maybe a little risky. Imagine standing at the top of a ski hill. Remember learning how to ride a bicycle. Or maybe you've done a ropes course. Each type of courage that we'll be looking at has risks and rewards. When we embrace physical courage, we risk physical injury. Our rewards on the other side include increased strength, new skills, and greater physical resilience. For me, I've just started backpacking again in the past couple of years. Back in 1994, I was doing something a little risky and caught a tip and blew out my knee skiing. And I've had surgery on it 4 times. At this point, it is bone on bone. And when I first was diagnosed after the first surgery, the doctor told me I shouldn't backpack anymore, so I gave it up for decades. When my new doctor, after the 4th surgery, told me that the good I would do getting it stronger would outweigh any wear and tear, I started gearing up, quite literally, because there's a ton of lightweight equipment now available that we didn't have back in the 90s. And I started gearing up physically as well, losing some weight to decrease the burden on my joints, going for longer and longer hikes, carrying more and more weight. The first backpacking trip a couple years ago felt near miraculous. Watching the sunrise over the Tetons last summer was a peak experience of my life. For me, going backpacking is without a doubt an act of love. Love of nature, of beauty, of solitude, and love of myself. It soothes my soul in ways I didn't realize I needed, and it makes me a better minister and a better human. So, how about you? When have you exhibited physical courage? Have there been times when you needed it and it wasn't there? Where do you find inspiration for acts of physical courage in your life? What gives you physical courage, and what might you do if you were physically braver? I invite you to reflect on these questions silently while the music plays. Emotional courage is about following our hearts. It gives us the capacity to feel the full spectrum of emotions, both pleasant and unpleasant, without attachment. It takes emotional courage to be vulnerable, to move through grief, to love again after loss. It takes emotional courage to let our anger bloom into determination and other forms of courage. Imagine telling someone you love them for the first time, or weeping openly in the presence of friends. Imagine breathing through rage and despair in order to find a path forward that has integrity. When we exhibit emotional courage, we're risking rejection or other forms of separation from relationship. But when we take that risk, we gain a supple strength that allows us to experience life more fully. We gain a sense of inner peace and acceptance. For me, it takes a lot of courage to move through grief. I have this tendency to bottle it up and distract myself and put off feeling it for as long as possible, even though I know from experience that that only prolongs the misery. For me, anticipatory grief winds up being way worse than actual grief because I lack the courage sometimes to just dive in. So what about you? When have you exhibited emotional courage? Have there been times when you didn't, but wished you had? Where do you find inspiration for acts of emotional courage in your life? What inspires emotional courage for you, and what might you do if you had an unlimited source? I invite you into reflection as the music plays.
Our third movement is about intellectual courage. Intellectual courage is about being open to new ideas and experiences, letting go of the familiar to expand our horizons. It's staying mentally flexible so that we can continue to learn and unlearn and relearn throughout our lives. Intellectual courage, well, it's a lot like curiosity. For example, it takes this kind of courage to take up a new hobby, or travel to a new land, or perhaps to really listen to someone from the other side of the political divide. When we exhibit intellectual courage, we risk our sense of certainty and mastery. We risk discomfort and failure, misunderstanding, and the cognitive dissonance that comes from holding two competing ideas in our minds at the same time. However, the rewards for intellectual courage include deeper understanding, exciting new concepts, a broadened perspective, mental clarity, and an increased capacity to see the world through other people's eyes. Now, it took a lot of intellectual courage for my wife Brandy and I to move to Japan back in 2010. We had to learn how to behave in a whole new culture, one in which they were too polite to tell us when we were screwing up. We had to learn public transit and how to get by without a car. We had to learn to sort our recycling into 13 different categories. We had to learn how to eat things like squid pizza with mayo and corn on it. That one actually might be more like physical courage. We had to learn new jobs and how to work with people from all across the world. And we also got to learn how to navigate pregnancy and becoming new parents while we were there, and doing all of this in a completely different language. Naturally, it turned out to be one of the most exciting, memorable, and fulfilling experiences of our lives, and it's a big part of what made us who we are today. So now it's your turn. When have you mustered your intellectual courage? And are there times when you've failed to do so and maybe remained a little closed-minded? What inspires you to be more intellectually courageous, more curious, and what might you do if you had unlimited intellectual courage? Our fourth type of courage is social courage. And this is the courage to go against the flow, to remain true to yourself and your values in spite of embarrassment or rejection. Social courage is the essence of leadership and change making. It takes this kind of courage to share a new idea, to join a protest, to ask a person out, to dress unconventionally, to share a controversial opinion, to stand up to injustice. The risks of social courage include embarrassment, rejection, a damaged reputation, outright banishment from certain communities, and even physical violence. But the rewards are immense, because without social courage, nothing ever changes. When we speak up, we can change other people's thinking. We can shine a light on problems too long ignored, and we can alleviate human suffering. Social courage is where revolutions begin. I struggle enormously with this type of courage. I worry so much what other people think of me. Growing up, I often had ideas of my own that were not appreciated by parents, friends, and teachers. I learned very quickly that it was much safer to remain silent, to conform, to tell other people exactly what I knew they wanted to hear so I didn't have to face confrontation or rejection. Now, what I didn't realize at the time was that the price I paid to avoid rejection from other people was rejecting myself. It was only when I found the courage to speak my own authentic truths that I started to feel like I was living my own life once again. So nowadays, I mostly express this kind of courage through the columns that I write for the local paper on social and political issues. I remember after I wrote my first controversial letter to the editor, I lay awake the entire night, just sure somebody was going to show up on my porch with a gun. They didn't. I've actually received no threats so far. But courage, like working a muscle, it gets easier with practice. And now I can submit my columns to the paper with only minor hyperventilation. I've found that sharing an authentic truth, it definitely can generate resistance. But I've found that it also generates resonance. The way a single note can completely change a chord, or even an entire song. So when have you shown social courage? And are there times when you didn't and later wished that you had? What inspires you to be socially courageous? And what would you do if you had more of this type of courage?
Our fifth movement is an invitation to focus on moral courage. Moral courage is akin to social courage. It involves standing up for what is right or doing the right thing, even when it's unpopular or uncomfortable. Civil disobedience requires moral courage. Being a whistleblower requires moral courage. But there are a whole bunch of opportunities for moral courage that are quieter and smaller than this. Do we stop and help someone, even if it's going to make us late? Do we refrain from gossiping? Do we tell someone we care about the truth, even when we know they might become angry or upset with us? Do we behave in ways that are in line with our values, even when no one is looking? The risks of moral courage include losing employment, losing friends, or even becoming a pariah. But the rewards, well, we can look at ourselves in the mirror and not hate who we see. We develop integrity and strength of character. We can sleep better at night knowing we've done our part. I've learned that when I fail to act with moral courage, I pretty much always regret it, so I've gotten braver with age. This means I do stop and give rides to people, both the underdressed young woman walking along the road in cold weather and the more intimidating large man, also underdressed and clearly in need of support. He wouldn't accept anything more than a ride, but at least I got him to someplace warm. It also means that I laid on the ground in the middle of the street in front of traffic as part of the Poor People's Campaign. I got arrested for the first time in my life. And then I agreed to be interviewed for the Dateline story this past year, even though I knew it would make some folks angry with me, and I have taken some flack. I'll be honest, though, this is not a type of courage that comes easily to me. In fact, I think if I didn't know that I had this community behind me, supporting me, I wouldn't be half as brave. But I do. And though I may never be able to move into activist spaces without that nervous flutter in my stomach, I'm raising my hand and speaking out more and more, and I'm reaping the benefits accordingly. So deep gratitude to each and every one of you. Now, what about you? When have you shown moral courage? Are there times you didn't and wished you had? Are there times you did and wished you hadn't? What inspires you to be morally courageous? And what would you do if you had an infinite supply of moral courage? Our sixth movement focuses on spiritual courage. Spiritual courage is a way of facing suffering without turning away. It looks like being present to the painful realities of life and breathing through them and finding a way forward. It does not look like refusing to acknowledge negative energy. It does not look like only having positive vibes. Rather, it involves the challenging work of mature faith, moving through doubt to a place of acceptance, a sense of purpose, to cultivate the quality of inner peace. The risks of spiritual courage include heartbreak and the occasional dark night of the soul. And in fact, I don't think there's any way to avoid those risks. They're part of the package, part of the journey. But the rewards are huge. Joy, a sense of meaning, deeper compassion, a greater sense of purpose and flow. Life just gets so very much sweeter. This is the kind of courage that feels most important to me personally. I mean, I am a minister, after all. More than that, I'm in training to become a certified spiritual director, someone who witnesses and accompanies other people on their brave spiritual journeys. So here's what I know. The more time and attention I give to the work of growing spiritually, the better my life goes. Spiritual courage, for me, feeds all the other forms of courage. When I know that I belong here on earth, that I matter, I find it easier to take the risks and do the brave things that love is asking of me. So, when have you been spiritually courageous? Are there times when you backed away from something because you weren't quite brave enough? What inspires spiritual courage in you, and what might you do if you were spiritually braver? Now, I'd like to invite you to turn to a neighbor and share something that came up for you as part of this discussion. I'd invite you to take turns speaking and listening. So when you're listening, do so without interrupting or commenting. Give each other the gift of undivided attention. I will ring the bell when it's time to switch. You'll have 2 minutes each. And obviously, if you'd rather not participate in having conversation, feel free to just continue to silently reflect on the role of these different kinds of courage in your life. I'd invite you to switch roles. The person who's speaking, it's your turn to listen. The person who's listening, it's your turn to speak. Hi, Taryn. So I hope that this continues to be a fruitful source of reflection and conversation for you, to remind ourselves that courage is the choice to love in the face of fear. I invite you to rise now in body or in spirit, and let's sing together our closing hymn, which is Love Will Guide Us.
Please be seated. Today's closing reading is called All That We Have Been, All That We Will Become by Leslie Ahuva Fales. All that we have been separately and all that we will become together is stretched out before and behind us like stars scattered across a canvas of sky. We stand at the precipice, arms locked together like tandem skydivers, working up the courage to jump. Tell me, friends, what have we got to lose? Our fear of failure? Our mistrust of our own talents? What have we got to lose? A poverty of the spirit? The lie that we are alone? What wonders await us in the space between the first leap and the moment our feet, our wheels, however we move our bodies across this precious earth, touch down softly on unknown soil? What have we got to lose that we can't replace with some previously unimaginable joy? Blessed are you, Spirit of life, who has sustained us, enlivened us, and enabled us to reach this moment. Give us courage in our leaping and gratitude in our landing. We'll now sing our musical benediction, There Is a Love.
There is a love
my turn. Please join me in the words to extinguish our chalice flame. We extinguish this chalice that it might glow gently in our hearts. May it light our paths as we leave this place. May it guide our way until we are together again. Go forth then, beloveds, and be brave. Lead with love. Don't be afraid. Know that whatever happens, wherever you go, whatever you do, we've got your back. So be it, and so may it be. Go in peace. Come back next week. And stay for coffee. We've got coffee downstairs.